ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa has bemoaned its weak branch structures as a cause for the party losing its clear majority in government. The African National Congress hosted its 113th anniversary celebrations at the Nelson Mandela Park Stadium in Khayelitsha yesterday. Delivering the January 8 statement, Ramaphosa outlined the party's objectives for 2025. He added that the party is still in charge as the leaders of the Government of National Unity. The party once again highlighted renewal as one of its top priorities. So let's get some analysis to those developments now with Professor Dirk Kotze from the UNISA Political Sciences Department. Professor, good morning. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
Firstly, Prof, before we get into it, does this 2025 January 8 statement offer a clear roadmap for the ANC's future? And what would you say are the key takeaways from the statement in terms of the ANC's priorities and its vision for the future of South Africa?
Yes, I think the statement that was presented yesterday consists mainly of two elements, and that's very traditional. It happens most of the time. The first one is what you referred to already, and that is about the ANC per se, the ANC as political organization or political party, with the main emphasis on that of renewal. So it is inward looking towards the ANC as political party. The second component is about the policies for this coming year. And it is a type of a program, an action program that is typical also of a speech like this. And to a large extent, it will be elaborated on in the SONA address a few weeks from now. So there's still some work to be done. There will be some legotlas, and that's where the other parties will come in. So what we've seen yesterday is what is the ANC's position on these matters, whether it is about job creation and economic development in general, about the importance of municipalities, the new very prominence of water, the way in which he presented it yesterday as even more important now as that of electricity. Electricity to a large extent have been dealt with. And then the issues about education, healthcare, national health insurance, and so on. So it does provide a very broad basis on which the more specific aspects can be discussed and developed specifically for the purpose of the SONA, the State of the Nation address.
The president also highlighted the strategic alliance between the ANC, the SACP, KATU and Sanko. Do you believe that this alliance remains a strong force for change in South Africa, or has it lost its effectiveness?
Well, I think what we've seen with the past election is that they do cooperate, especially at the times of elections. But in between the periods of elections, that cooperation is less visible. It's normally at the level of the secretariats of these different organizations. And then most importantly, I would say, was the announcement of the SACP that they are going to participate in next year's local government election on their own and not support the ANC in that. So I think that still is very much a point of discussion, and that the ANC puts a lot of pressure on the party. President Ramaphosa has done it now a few days ago again, in order to try to convince them to move away from that decision. So many people, especially the public, I think don't see it anymore as a very cohesive alliance, that it is something where especially the Communist Party, for example, play the same role in terms of thinking, of policy development as for many years in the past, as well as KATU, which has also lost a lot of its leverage. It lost a lot of its members. We need SAFTU, the South African Federation of Trade Unions of Zwelinzima Vavi, split away, especially NUMSA, that was part of that. So it's not the same KATU as the one that we knew 10, 15 years ago. And therefore, I think the dynamics over time have changed quite significantly.
All right. And Professor, speaking of policy development, the ANC calls for decisive action, rapid implementation of policy. Are these calls realistic? I mean, given the ANC's track record on governance and implementing transformative legislation?
Well, I think this is going to be proven by their actions. So it's very difficult to predict that. It is a new type of government now. We all know it's not a purely ANC government anymore. There's now ministers of 10 parties in total. Some of these ministers from other parties have become very active and is very visible in public. And so some differences we've seen. We've also seen that even where ANC ministers are still, like, for example, when it comes to the railways that have been activated much more now, the use of ports, there's definitely some progress in that respect. Electricity is possibly the best example of progress. So we do see some new elements and progress, but the big issue that remains is that of general economic development, and that can lead to job creation, that there is more employment, more absorption of South Africans into the economy and less dependence on social grants. That's a huge challenge. And I think though there are some small changes in the level of unemployment or employment that is improving over time, but with small percentages. So I don't think it yet has that public impact that the ANC is looking for in order for the public to say, well, there's definitely a change that we are experiencing. So this year is going to be critical because I would say the honeymoon of the government of national unity, of trying together, trying to understand each other, trying to develop cooperative practices, to a large extent, they have completed that. Now it is down to really starting to implement it. And I don't think they have to wait for the SONA speech. What we've heard yesterday is to a large extent the policy package that the ANC developed in the past, and that since the election of May, they to a large extent have implemented together with the other parties. So it's not going to be dramatically different, and therefore there's no excuse to wait for the SONA speech as well as this year's budget.
All right, Prof. Now, the statement mentions the contributions of the ANC Women's League and Youth League. Do you think that these structures are effectively addressing the ANC-specific needs and concerns of women and young people?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the different leagues of the ANC have for many years been very, very much under the radar, very much almost invisible. The Women's League may be less, but the Youth League completely invisible for a long time. The Veterans League might be the only exception. So I don't think one can say and give them a report of saying that they've done well in the past number of years, and especially even the last year. They still have a lot of work to do in order to develop a voice for themselves. I think the problem is that they become subsumed in the statements and by President Ramaphosa to a large extent and some of the others, but they don't present an identity of their own, a voice of their own on the issues that are very particular to them. And I think in that sense, they haven't really succeeded yet to establish a presence for themselves.
All right, fair enough. Now, the statement highlights the recruitment of 10,000 new police officers. Is this sufficient to address the complexities of crime in South Africa?
No, it won't be, but it will assist in areas, for example, where the police stations are understaffed, and they are, especially in the smaller centers, where there are not sufficient numbers of police persons in order to provide the basic security there. It's not about numbers for me. It's about what is the quality of their training, what is the quality of service that they can provide, how much will they be able to perform the policing services and tasks wherever they are. We are seeing also that there's now moving back to a situation of there's more specialization within the police service. There's specialized units that emerge now again. They appear to be quite effective. But that is still at a very early stage. So I think there's hope. The new Minister of Police certainly makes a difference. he is more effective. He has a completely new approach to especially the high-profile types of crime. And I think we should give him some time more, but there is certainly a change. It's not business as usual as in the past. But it is, I think, where there's still a problem is not necessarily in the main centers of South Africa, although there are problems. For example, the Cape Flats is a problem area, some areas in KwaZulu-Natal. Then these different mafias, the construction mafia, now they talk about the water mafia even. These are structural components of security that must be addressed, and it's very difficult. It's not purely doing better patrolling by police. So we are looking, I'm personally looking for that in those areas some major significant improvements and changes are made.
And then while we're still on crime, Professor, now the ANC statement calls for a united front against gender-based violence and femicide. Now, given the multifaceted nature of this issue, what concrete steps do you think can be taken to achieve this?
Well, what I think, which is, and again, to some extent it is done, but not effectively enough, is that it should not be seen purely as a policing function. It is something which includes the social welfare, the social development. It includes even, I would argue, education. It will include the way, the employment processes, that there's better employment, especially for women, in order to be able for them to be absorbed, integrated into the economy. So it's not purely a security issue. It is an issue which deals with, and because it's so complicated, it includes a myriad of aspects that must come together. And I think what's not yet sufficiently and effectively done is how to the different components of government services to be able to integrate, to work together to deal with that matter.
All right. So before we let you go, Prof, Ramaphosa said he was very confident that the ANC will return to full power in the next elections. Are there any clear indicators or trends that suggest that the ANC will return to full power? Is this likely?
I would say at this stage, it's not yet likely. What we've seen with some of the opinion polls, the last that I've seen is those conducted around about September last year. There was an increase in the ANC's support base. The same applied to the DA and to the IFP, a decline for MK and for the EFF. And I think that is to a large extent what happens with the MK and EFF will determine what is also the future of the ANC. Those different parties are intimately linked to each other in terms of their support bases. One of the key challenges for the ANC in order to grow in future is that they must be able to start to mobilize the young voters. In the past, they were not really successful with that, and that will be one of the key components. And then, as I said, is to what will be the future of the MK party, because in this past election, the MK party was the main threat to the ANC. If they grow still significantly, it will mean losses for the ANC. So for the ANC to turn around, the MK party will have to go into a decline mode. And at the same time, I think what is the ANC itself identified as one of its main weaknesses is the way in which they organize themselves from within. The branches are not very operational, and that they don't relate effectively to the public immediately around them and address the public. It's seen as a party on its own, as a sort of elitist group who are not necessarily connected to the people in their different communities. So it's a huge task for the ANC to change what I would say two things. The first is the public perception of what the ANC is, and secondly, public trust. And trust is a very difficult component in order to develop once this trust is going into a negative phase. And trust can only be built, I would argue, based on positive, concrete achievements by the ANC. So they must show results. They can't just talk about it.